Welcome to the Life Self-Mastery Podcast, where we bring in entrepreneurs who have created online businesses and improved their lifestyles. Here's your host, Rohit Malhotra.
Hi everyone, I'm Rohit from lifestylemastery.com, and today I'm excited to have Elaine Pofeldt, who's a journalist who has contributed to Forbes.com, CNBC, INC, and Money Magazine, among others, and is the author of the brilliant book, The $1 Million One-Person Business: Make Great Money, Work the Way You Like, and Have the Life You Want. Welcome to the show, Elaine.
Thank you, Rohit. It's great to be here.
How did you start your journey being a journalist?
I'm one of those people that found what I love to do early, and even as far back as kindergarten, I loved writing. In high school, I was on my high school newspaper. Now that's probably online, but at the time it was a newspaper. And I just stuck with it and eventually found business journalism and found I really enjoyed it and stuck with that.
What made you write the book, The $1 Million One-Person Business?
I write a blog for Forbes about one-person businesses, and I came across statistics showing that in the United States, there was an uptick in the number of one-person businesses getting to 1 million to 2.49 million in revenue. These are Census Bureau statistics, and the number has increased from 2011 by 33% to more than 35,000 businesses. I got really curious about what exactly they were doing. And so I started slicing and dicing the census data by industry, and I wrote a post. I got a lot of response from that, with readers very curious about the specifics of what they were doing. So when I said they were in retail, for instance, they said, well, I need to know what they're doing in retail. Is it e-commerce? What are they selling? I had no way of finding out because the Census Bureau protects the identity of the people that fill out those forms. So I wrote to the readers and I said, if you're one of these businesses, people are really curious about what you're doing, write to me. I would love to tell your story. And a handful of people wrote back to me and said, I'm one of those businesses. And I wrote a post about them. And it went completely viral, like nothing else I've ever written. I've been a journalist for a long time. I was on staff at Fortune Small Business Magazine for 8 years. And I never had any experience like this before with such a big public response. It has over 300,000 page views now. And that touched off a series of articles where every time I found somebody that fit this category, I would profile them and drill down to what they were doing that was different from the many businesses that are run by one person or partners that are struggling and cannot get to even six figures because they don't know how to grow the business. And that is what led to the book, where I looked at these entrepreneurs at a higher level to see what do they have in common and what can we all learn from them.
Fascinating, you said the number of one-person businesses are growing in US, but, there's some sort of fascination in the media about businesses which make, $100 billion or $1 billion.
Exactly. But, and I'm part of that media, and I've written those stories too.
Absolutely. I mean, in the book, you talk about e-commerce, content, real estate, manufacturing, marketing services, coaching, consultancy, as some of the ways where people are running $1 million businesses. How does one decide, which is the right way to go forward and build small business?
I think you need to follow your interests. Your business does not have to be built around your life's greatest passion. Sometimes those passions aren't meant to be turned into a business, but it has to be something that you're very interested in. What I found was the businesses are in many different industries. So there's no reason to, for instance, start an e-commerce store if what you're really interested in is delivering professional services. It's more a matter of how you run the business. And this was just reinforced for me at a panel I ran at WeWork Soho West in New York last week with a bunch of the entrepreneurs. They rely heavily on 3 strategies to scale their revenue with no employees. One of them is automation. I would say that they have a much greater focus on automating routine tasks in a business than most people. Automation is not a new idea. I didn't invent it. It's been around for a long time, but these people bridge the knowing and doing gap, and they actually automate things, a lot of things, and they don't just do it once. They're constantly adding new things that they automate. Number 2 is they do rely on freelancers and outsourcing. They are able to do this because they also have an emphasis on process that I think is a little different than the average business. When they do a task, whether it's writing a blog post, updating their website, whatever it may be, a lot of times they will document how they do it so that they can hand off that task to other people. They may not have employees. A lot of times with a one-person business, if you have one, you know what I'm talking about, there isn't the cash flow to support a traditional employee, and you might not even have the need to use their services all the time. For instance, a web designer, how often do you really update your website in a big way where you need the web designer working full time? Because they document how they want things done, they're able to hand things off successfully. And they'll often use the combination of automation, freelancers, and then using outsourced back office services like fulfillment by Amazon, for instance, for an e-commerce store, to achieve a lot more than one person can do. It requires some setup, and I think that's why a lot of people aren't doing it. But once they know they can do this and how much more revenue and profits they can bring in, it becomes a no-brainer.
When you run a small business, you may not get the benefits of medical insurance and other things. What would be your tips, how to maintain a one-person business so that they have some sort of security, they don't have to fall back to their old jobs?
You generally have to make more revenue than most people think they do. I did some calculations, and basically if you made, let's say, $100,000 in your job, you need to make $130,000 to $140,000 in a one-person business to afford the health insurance. Now, this varies a lot by age. So if you're 22 years old in perfect health, your healthcare is not going to be very expensive. But if you're a little older or you have a family, like for instance, I have a family of 4 children and my husband, we were both self-employed for 10 years and had to buy the insurance. And I will tell you, we live in New Jersey. It's a high-cost state. Our premiums were $38,000 a year out of pocket, not including any deductibles and things like that. So it's quite expensive. So you really do need to make more. And that was one reason I wrote the book. There really is no social safety net for freelancers. The government hasn't really caught up to the needs of freelancers. There is no unemployment, generally speaking, for freelancers. So if your work dries up, you better have some money in the bank or you're out of luck, which is unfortunate. It would be nice if some of the needs of freelancers were taken into account, but they're really not at the moment. We're really operating in a very dated system. So if you want to have your own business, and it's wonderful to have it, you really do have to focus on bringing in enough revenue to cover these ancillary costs. And I think that's what trips people up and forces them to go back into a job. They don't realize that, and they're kind of caught up in enjoying what they do, but they don't think about, okay, well, how do I sustain this so that I can keep on doing it? And through this book, I wanted to show that there are a lot of people that maybe aren't traditional business people that are doing what they love, but manage to pull that off.
You've spoken to a lot of entrepreneurs. What are some of your favorite stories about running these 1 million businesses? And did you get to analyze, if it's a particular industry, be it content or e-commerce or real estate, where, you get more number of people who are running these $1 million businesses?
The major categories that I found that were accessible to all were e-commerce. I would say that is the number one in terms of accessibility. Professional services, things like an attorney or an accountant putting out a shingle, an architect. Personal services, things like a nutritionist or a fitness coach. There is real estate, informational content creation, and manufacturing. It's possible to actually run a manufacturing business with just one person because of outsourced services now called co-packers. So if you have a food business idea, you can't really make the food in your home kitchen. Even though you might experiment in the beginning, you can't sell that food because you have to meet certain health codes, and the co-packers can help you handle that so that you can actually scale the business and get your product into major stores. So those are the categories. And I would say in terms of my favorite stories, they're all my favorites. Honestly, it's kind of like my children, right? It's hard to pick your favorites. I would say one example from the book that many people find helpful is Laszlo Nadler, who is in the opening chapter of the book. He runs Tools for Wisdom Planners, and he got to $2 million in revenue on his own with no employees. He lives in New Jersey. He was a project manager at Bank of America in New York, and he found he had these great project management skills, but he wasn't enjoying his work as much as he wanted to. So he started playing around with designing planners that were focused not so much on your to-do list, but on how do you move towards your life's highest purpose. Over a period of a couple of years, he experimented with them. He found someone to help him design them, and he put them up on Amazon, kept tinkering with them. And after about 2 years, he was able to get to 6-figure revenue, and then was able to quit his job and devote himself full-time. Now, he started the business in 2012. He just hired his first employee last month. So he got that far to 2 million on his own. And then he realized he wanted to scale the traditional way. And that is one of the points of the book. I'm not against scaling the traditional way. I think it's great if you can, but if you do it prematurely, sometimes it can crush off your cash flow and then you wind up having to close the business. He waited until he couldn't really go any further. He had the revenue to support an employee and do it the proper way. And now he has a lot of options ahead of him. He could keep the business small if he wants to and have a lifestyle business, or he could be one of those businesses that you talked about earlier, Rohit, a scalable business that would be more like the Silicon Valley model. And it's nice to have those options. Not a lot of people do, but I'm hoping that by learning from these entrepreneurs who generously shared what worked for them in the book, that more people will have that choice if they want it.
What I want to know is how can people find the courage to leave their jobs? Suppose they've been into jobs for a decade or more and go full into entrepreneurship must be a very scary thought. So are there something they need to get in order before they jump with both their feet and leave the jobs?
I never recommend that people just quit their job unless they have some sort of other income or someone else is supporting them. If you have responsibilities like children or a mortgage or an apartment to pay for, the best way to start a business is on the side where you do small experiments, kind of like Laszlo Nadler did. So it doesn't have to take this giant leap of faith. He tested his idea slowly over a 2-year period. I know people are impatient sometimes to leave behind a corporate career because they're no longer happy with it and they want their freedom. But if you have economic responsibilities, you can't just ignore them because the stress of ignoring them is going to come back and bite you. So I would say take the risk out of it as much as you can by testing things in a small way. If you want to run a food business, don't just start a restaurant, start a small catering group and really test it out. Make sure people actually like what you have to sell. There might be things about the market that you really don't know and you won't find out until you test it. Those tests will give you so much confidence. I know one couple in the book, Camille and Ben Arneberg, did that with their store, Willow and Everett. They're a young couple. He was in the military and she worked in corporate social sustainability. They wanted to do a business. She really loved the meaningfulness of her work, but she didn't actually like corporate life and they wanted to do a business together. So first, they tried selling compression sleeves for running. It's those bands that go around your arm and hold things. They're both athletic. And they thought, okay, well, we love running. Let's try this out. But it didn't sell well. So they said, okay, we learned from that. So let's try another interest. And they tried selling accessories for parties and entertaining. They like to have friends over, like a lot of young couples. And they found that this worked out really well for them. They put a handful of products on Amazon. They got them from a private label manufacturer in India who was able to customize them a little bit. And then they saw which ones sold and which ones didn't. And they doubled down on the ones that sold. And the ones that didn't sell well, they lowered the price and they unloaded them basically and then reinvested in the business. So this gave them the courage to go forward. So I'd say if you're steeling yourself against fear, that's telling you something is wrong. You don't have the setup in place to cushion you financially so that you can see through your idea. Because we all see this in our communities where you'll see a restaurant open up and you say to yourself, I'm going to get around to going there. It looks really interesting. I'd love to try that place. And then by the time you get around to it, it's closed because the owner ran out of money. And it's a shame because they might have put a couple $100,000 into it. That can happen with any type of business if you don't give yourself the runway. So I would say you don't forget about courage and actually just get proof of concept. And then you're not going to need the courage. You're going to have an argument in favor of either doing what you want to or not and trying something new.
Solo entrepreneurship can be lonely, so how does one decide that why, or you've been a freelancer for some time, how did you get to decide what's your why?
It's funny, I never feel lonely, partly because I have 4 children, ages 7 to 14. So it's hard to feel lonely, and my husband works from home too. But I would say even when my husband is out on the road and the kids are in school, I'm never lonely because I do make time to meet with people in person. A lot of times I live outside of New York City and I'll take one day a week where I go in and I schedule 3 coffee appointments with different people that I have met through my work. I do a lot of phone work and a lot of times people do pass through New York. So I'm lucky, but that's true of a lot of areas. And if you don't live in an area like New York where people tend to pass through, there are meetups for entrepreneurs everywhere. And I think it is so inspiring to be around other people. They don't have to be the world's most successful entrepreneurs, by the way. I had an event at the WeWork that I had mentioned earlier, and Some people were thinking about starting a business. Some people were already running a business. Some people were in successful businesses. Some people were in struggling businesses. But just talking with them gave me energy because we were all running businesses or thinking about it and had this shared interest. And I think that's so important to not isolate. And you could say taking time away from your business, you're not making money during that time, but you really need that to feed your soul and to feed your inspiration. So I would say make time to do it, even if it's just once a month, and do other things too, where you get out, volunteer in your community. That's a good way to break the isolation. If you work out, I like to go to a gym sometimes instead of doing something solitary like running, which I also like to do, just to be around other people and meet people, because you never know where you'll get inspiration in a business.
Right. What do you think would be some of the favorite tools for running a $1 million business? You talked about automation. Did you hear about a few tools which can help entrepreneurs to run $1 million businesses?
Absolutely. I would say my number one favorite, and I think you use this yourself, are scheduling apps. Calendly is one I happen to use Schedule once, but I know both are excellent. We all schedule appointments, and one of the most annoying tasks is emailing back and forth to try to find a time with someone else where you're trying to talk and you both have busy schedules. These apps will allow you to block out times that you're available for phone calls or appointments, and you just send a link to your public schedule to the people you're setting up appointments with, and they pick what time works for them. I find that is a huge time saver. It saves me easily 3 or 4 hours some weeks, because sometimes I do 20 phone calls a week. I can't even tell you what a blessing it is. I would say automating your accounting software as much as possible by attaching your bank account and your business credit card can be a huge time saver, so you don't manually have to enter each transaction. It can also save you on bookkeeping costs if you outsource your bookkeeping. Those two things are great. And I would say a mileage tracker. If you have an accountant, your accountant is probably telling you track your mileage. It's a deduction. And a lot of times I would find when I didn't have the mileage tracker on my phone, I wouldn't do it. And I would miss out on a lot of the trips. So now I have something called Everlance, which is wonderful. You just get in the car, and then later you classify the trips as personal, business, or other for things like trips to the doctor, which are also deductible. And it saves me so much time. So those three things alone can really be a blessing for your business and extend what you can do. And I would say any one-person business should take this month and set a goal of automating 7 hours of tasks a week. It's not as hard as you think when you think about all the little menial things that we all do every week. And you'll then have freed up a whole day when you can focus on giving yourself a break so that you have the distance from the business, and maybe it's meeting people, working out, whatever it is, working on strategy, thinking about research and development, doing experiments in your business. Freeing that time is so valuable. And once you do that, you will never go back. You're not going to believe how much better you feel about your business and how much more successful your business will be.
What do you think are the advantages or disadvantages of running a small business?
I would say the lack of a social safety net is a disadvantage in the United States. It varies a lot by country. So, for instance, if you're in Australia or the UK or Canada, the healthcare system is much more hospitable. So if you're in the US, you do have to deal with this reality, and it's not a small one. That is the number one disadvantage. There's also income insecurity. So when you're starting out, you may not have a steady income, you may not have steady clients. You need to figure out a way to pay your bills, which are usually due on a cyclical basis, right? Your mortgage or your rent is due monthly, even if your income comes in 90 days, right? So you have to figure out, okay, how am I going to deal with that? The way to deal with that for me has always been living below my means. And I know maybe people don't like to hear that, but we have 4 children. We have 3 girls in 1 bedroom. We could have had a bigger house if we wanted to, but living in this way, although we have to pare down our possessions a little bit, allows us the breathing room if something happens in the economy. I started my business in the end of 2007. So it was going along swimmingly. And then we had the Great Recession. So I lived through that like a lot of other business owners. And I had times where people were paying me in 90 to 120 days, good clients, but they were hitting a bump too. So you have to plan for that. Something like that could happen again. I hope it never does for all of our sake. But if you live below your means, then you will be able to build the cushion that you needed. It seems to be against the way a lot of us are trained to think, because we live in a consumer culture and there's so much temptation to spend, but you have to think about the fact that you're freeing up time to live the way that you want. And it doesn't mean living an extremely frugal life where you don't enjoy any luxuries at all, but it's more a matter of choosing what's important to you and then saying, where can I save? In my case, it was on saving on my house by not having the biggest possible house I could afford. For someone else, it might be you go camping on vacation instead of going to Aruba. So for a couple of years, so they have a little savings in the bank to cushion you from the cash flow. It's not really that hard. And then I would say the other disadvantage is sometimes you may be surrounded by people who just don't understand why anyone would be an entrepreneur. Sometimes you may live in a community where everyone has a corporate or government job, or you might be part of a family that just doesn't get it when it comes to entrepreneurship. They think you're crazy for doing it, or it's too high risk, and it can be discouraging. But the way I look at it is you have a role as a self-employed person or entrepreneur where you can educate them. You don't want to fight with people about their life choices, but you can show them some of the benefits that you're getting from it. In doing so and being positive about it, you can gradually win their support. And the biggest thing that will win their support, by the way, is actually sticking with it and doing things. If they see you at your computer every day, building the business and gradually winning the clients and winning the sales and course correcting when things aren't going well, you'd be surprised at how supporters start coming out of the woodwork, because they see that you're not just talking about it like a lot of people do when it comes to businesses, but you're actually doing it and pursuing it. And that it has a magnetic quality.
That's great advice. Thank you. So let's quickly do the top 3. What's your favorite business book?
I would have to say it's the 4-Hour Work Week. Years ago, it was 10 years ago, I worked at Fortune Small Business Magazine, and one of my responsibilities was as the book editor. And I almost never did a book excerpt because, honestly speaking, there were a lot of poorly written business books and we had very high standards. And I felt like I would only deliver a book if I felt like the readers of our magazine were going to get a lot out of it. And I came across this book and I thought, wow, this is really original thinking. It's fun to read, and this is going to really influence people. And interestingly enough, when I worked on my own book, a lot of the entrepreneurs in the book said they were influenced by the 4-Hour Work Week. And I actually did a post for the 4-Hour Work Week blog where I did some case studies for Tim Ferriss showing exactly how they applied the ideas of the 4-Hour Work Week to build their $1 million one-person businesses. So it had a real impact on how people think about work. And I think it would have to be my favorite business book. There are many good ones, but that one personally really affected my life.
Tim Ferriss created a cult of his own by writing this book. If you could go back in time when you started your business, what is the one thing you would have focused on?
It was marketing. When I started my business, I didn't really have much of a plan. I was in a situation where I had 3 very small children. I had 2, I think my twins were 3 years old, and I had a baby. And I needed more flexibility in my life, and that became my number one priority. So I thought, I'm going to make this work no matter what. And in the beginning, no one knew I was in business. I had been an editor and I had been an employee for many years. So I started every morning. I would get up and I would spend 3 hours on spreading the word in some way, working on my LinkedIn profile, putting up my website, arranging to meet people for coffee who were editors who might have work to assign, calling contacts that I had from my previous career to let them know that I was in business. And that was not that easy to do with small children. I didn't have a babysitter. I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and do a lot of this stuff, but I really was determined to make it work because I needed flexibility that badly at that time in my life. And it took about 3 months. The first 3 months, I had, I think, 3 assignments, and I thought, wow, I don't know if this is going to work. But then all of a sudden, January 1st came, and I realized what had happened. I started the business at the end of the budget year for many of the publications, so they had almost spent their whole budget. All of a sudden, I was barraged with work, and it's never slowed down since then. I've always been fully booked. A lot of times, my work spreads over into the weekend. As much as I try for it not to, somehow I wind up writing always takes longer than you think. And I do other projects like the book that wind up taking time. But that is what I would recommend to people. You really have to market yourself in the beginning in a new business. And, assuming you know how to provide the service. I didn't have a product related business. If you have a product related business, you've got to get the product developed first, but then you've got to tell people you're in business. And that it takes a lot of time. But once you get everything set up, those things can last for a while. I update my LinkedIn profile, but I never had to do that initial work again of just building the whole thing. Same with my website. I update it. I have help with that now with updating it. Social media, the same thing. You get these things set up, and then all of a sudden they organically start to create a presence for you where people know you're selling something and they'll come to you. And then the step right after that is building word of mouth. And the way you do that is you just knock it out of the park for every client, no matter how little they're paying you. Sometimes in the beginning, if you're doing something new that you never did before, you may have to charge a low amount to win people's confidence and then build from there. But if you do an amazing job for each person, the word of mouth is going to build your business very quickly. And I find that's true with most successful one-person businesses. It really is word of mouth. Even stores, if you have an e-commerce store and people have a great experience, the human touch is something that a one-person business can really bring that differentiates it from the big companies that are online. That friendly human presence really goes a long way. So that's what I would recommend.
My last question is, what's your favorite online tool?
In addition to Calendly and Schedule Once, I would say the online accounting software that's available now, I've used different ones. I really like FreshBooks. I'm currently using QuickBooks because it had some functions that I needed. Xero accounting is excellent. Those things are very important for business owners. I know it sounds obvious, but a lot of people actually don't use them and use Excel spreadsheets, and it's really easy to make mistakes. So I would say if you have no online tools at all, the first one you should use is an online accounting software. I realized this when early in my business, there was 1 month where my husband said, Elaine, it just seems like you earned so much less this month. Did you have a slow period? I said, no, I've been really, really busy. I didn't earn less this month. And I was keeping my records in Excel spreadsheets. And then I get this letter from one of my clients, a big company, and they said, we've sent you a $5,000 check that you didn't cash 6 months ago. And, we're resending it and, hoping you cash it or something like that. And it was during that period. And I didn't even notice that I had not gotten this $5,000 payment because my record keeping was obviously not up to par, right? So something like that can really make a big difference in the success of your business. I mean, what if it was a $20,000 check? Hopefully I would have noticed it then. And it wasn't that I had such a huge amount of money rolling in that year. It was very tight because I was starting a brand new business, but I still somehow missed that. So I would say if you're not using an online accounting software, find one that you like. I found that FreshBooks was extremely easy to use in the beginning and is a really great program. That might be a good one to start with. And I would say one of those would be my favorite.
I'll put that in the show notes. What are the best way people can reach out to you and buy your book, The $1 Million One-Person Business?
The book, The $1 Million One-Person Business, is on Amazon. So if you put that into the search box, my name is in the show notes. I have a hard to spell name and you probably won't remember it. So check the show notes or the title, The $1 Million One-Person Business, with it all spelled out in words. Or you can go to the website, themilliondollar1personbusiness.com. There is a contact me box there. So if you write to me, I will write back to you. I'm also on social media, on LinkedIn and Twitter. A lot of people write to me there under Elaine Pofeldt. It's Pof as in Frank, ELDT. I really welcome hearing from business owners or people that aspire to run a business. I really enjoy being part of this community of entrepreneurs, and it's only going to grow. And I think the one-person business is about to really have a moment because of all these amazing tools out there that will help us extend our reach. And I think by learning from each other, we can all grow our businesses successfully.
Right, Elaine. Yeah, I'm a fan of your book, and that's one of the best books I've read this year. So thank you very much for coming onto the show. I really enjoyed it, and I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you so much, Rohit. I really appreciate your kind words, and I appreciate the chance to speak with your listeners. You asked fantastic questions, and what a pleasure. It was really nice to talk with you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Life Self-Mastery podcast, where we teach you how to start and grow your online business. For more information, visit Rohit's blog at www.lifeselfmastery.com.